your registered sessions.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the final day of the Connected Health Summit. If this is the first day you're attending this conference, welcome. I hope you're familiar with our research. Parks Associates is a market research and consulting firm focused on the consumer technology space. We've studied connected health in the home for over a decade now, looking at everything from telehealth services to remote patient monitoring to independent living and senior care solutions, as well as consumer use of connected wellness, fitness, and wearable devices, and app-based solutions. As a company, we produce over 100 syndicated research reports annually and provide research and consulting services to over 500 different companies. In case you missed my session on Tuesday, I'm Kristen Hannick, a senior analyst here at Parks Associates. In terms of my background, I was trained as a health education specialist in undergrad and did my master's in an MS-MPH dual degree program combining medical anthropology with public health. In particular, I specialize in technology adoption. As you might imagine, it's been an interesting year for me looking at all of the changes and progress we've been seeing in the connected health market to date, even as we continue to deal with the tragedy that is COVID-19. This event marks our 7th year of running our Connected Health Summit. Usually we're in sunny San Diego this time of year, but with everything going on, we've transitioned to a virtual model made possible by these great sponsors you see here. So a special thanks to Alarm.com, Nortec, Athena Health, Softtech, Beclar, and Sprosty for helping us move to our new virtual format. On our first day of our conference, we focused on the big picture of how COVID-19 has impacted the healthcare ecosystem, how telehealth and remote patient monitoring use really skyrocketed as a result, as well as changes in the reimbursement and regulatory landscape, and some of what we expect to see coming over the next following months and years. On the second day of our conference, we turned our attention to the senior population and its needs, looking at how seniors have been impacted by COVID-19 and how caregivers and solutions makers have responded. We also looked at what home service providers are doing in the space in terms of partnerships and spoke to some of the business models and opportunities available. Today, we're going to take a look at the data and analytics space, as well as look towards the future of connected health. For the next few hours, we're going to take a look at really what has changed in terms of health data tracking and analytics. This includes the realm of what we call digital therapeutics, app-based approaches to changing lifestyles, resulting in improved clinical outcomes, as well as device-based approaches, taking vital sign readings and interpreting them, and the use of AI and machine learning on evaluating electronic medical records, X-rays, and other data inputs. I'm going to take the next 20 minutes or so to talk about some of the trends we're seeing on the consumer side of things. Then we're going to hear from Angie Ibrahimi from Blue Shield of California on what they're seeing in terms of health trends, as well as how Blue Shield of California is applying its insights to improve its health outcomes and care delivery. Afterwards, we will be talking about how COVID-19 has impacted the world of connected health analytics with a great lineup of panelists from HP, Validic, Javion, and Be Well Connected Health. Make sure to get your questions in ahead of time. There's a chat box to the right of your screen with a tab labeled questions. Submit your questions there so we can be sure to have them answered by our panelists towards the end of the session. Finally, we'll end this session with a few networking discussions in Zoom breakout rooms. However, be sure to stick around afterwards because at 12:30 Central Time, we'll be starting our final session of the day looking at the future of connected health. Before I get started with my Analyst Insight presentation, just a quick note on how to engage with our SwapCard platform. On the right of your screen, you should see a panel with 3 tabs, one for chat, one for questions, and one for polling. Again, to ask our speakers questions, you can type a question into the question tab. We'll also have a few polls that you can answer throughout the day in the polling tab. And if you want to download our presentations for the day, there is a download link at the bottom of the session webpage under Documents. So yes, health tracking. 2020 has seen some profound changes in the way people think about their health and wellness. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, fewer Americans are eating out. Many have begun building out home gyms and are making use of digital fitness classes in order to keep themselves fit. About 2/3 of heads of US broadband households report plans to make a permanent lifestyle change that will improve their health. The market for connected health and fitness has changed as a result of COVID-19. Consumers report high intentions to purchase tested connected health products and are interested in digital solutions to improve their well-being. Many report using app-based approaches to managing their health and fitness. Many are also taking part in digital fitness classes in order to keep themselves fit in this time of social distancing. Consumer experiences with telehealth are also opening up a new market for remote patient monitoring solutions. And we see more opportunities for using health data to guide care delivery and improve care outcomes. So, health data. There's been a lot of demand for health data from many different parties. Demand from care providers, demand from insurers, demand from public health professionals, and demand from consumers themselves. And players in this space are really interested in all sorts of types of data: vital sign information, physical activity metrics, calorie consumption and diet tracking, the digitization of diagnostic data such as x-rays, information on COVID-19 and its spread. And that's really to say nothing of the other types of data out there: data collected in electronic medical records, data on operational metrics that can be used to further improve care, tackle new areas of opportunity, and increase operational efficiencies. Among care providers, there is also a growing recognition of the limitations of traditional telehealth solutions: remote visits enabled by video calls, phone calls, or text messages. Providers oftentimes are missing out on the data that they need in order to properly evaluate their patients. Well, in the last few months, some care providers have been getting around this by asking their patients to take their own vital sign readings with an unconnected product and share the results via a text message or web portal. This is not ideal. It asks a lot of the patient, and it may not always be accurate. There's been demand for a more long-term approach: new models for care that make use of devices to gather data, either for remotely monitoring and managing consumers' chronic conditions, or even for remote diagnostics. We've seen an increasing number of vendors scale up their current offerings or even build out new solutions to meet the needs of their clients. There's also been a lot of movement on the merger and acquisition side of things, such as the Teladoc and Livongo merger. Much of this has been enabled by a recent change in reimbursement by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid that hit just this past January. Care providers can now receive reimbursement for remote patient monitoring services provided by vendors. Another area where we're seeing interest, both on the part of insurers and care organizations, is also in more full-stack approaches towards managing chronic conditions and lifestyles. The medical field and public health has long recognized the impact that lifestyle has on health status, health outcomes, and chronic conditions such as diabetes. Historically, the way that care providers, health systems, and others have engaged with these at-risk populations has been through the field of health education, running programs and interventions that educate patients on what they can do to improve their health, challenge them to make lifestyle changes, and coach them along the way. However, historically, it's been pretty difficult to keep patients engaged with these types of programs and on track with these sorts of lifestyle changes in the long run. It takes regular check-ins and can be expensive. The most effective programs in particular are also the most labor-intensive, and they're difficult to run at scale. It can also be difficult to track results in the long run, which means that oftentimes you aren't sure if the intervention worked and if the cost to run the program was actually worth it. However, technological changes and innovations in design have led to new app-based approaches for supporting patients' lifestyle changes. These solutions make use of gamification and nudges to motivate patients and keep them engaged. Technology has also made it easier and somewhat less expensive to provide individualized coaching and education, even by live health coaches, dietitians, and other experts. One of the big benefits with these app-based solutions is also the ability to track results using data entered into the app or data provided by connected devices and services. Health insurers and care providers sometimes are even able to track participation in one of these programs and tie it to improved clinical outcomes or even reduced cost. This ability to track data and outcomes lets stakeholders know if programs are effective and worth their while, and typically they are. Blue Shield of California has had some great results with its Wellvolution program, and we'll be hearing about that in just a bit. And who hasn't heard of Livongo and its success in helping diabetes patients? For many companies in the remote patient monitoring space in particular, this type of lifestyle change solution really represents the next evolution of their businesses. Looking specifically at the consumer side of things, connected health as a category is really approaching the mainstream. As of May 2020, 42% of heads of US broadband households report that their household owns at least one of 18 different internet connected health products. Households that own at least one of these products report owning around three on average. For the last few years, the connected health space operated similarly to where the smart home space used to be. Adoption of the category overall had stalled, but current device owners were adding more and more devices to the fold, either adopting more device categories or for devices that are personal and not household, such as wearables, so smartwatches, fitness trackers, sports watches. They were encouraging other household members to also adopt. However, we've seen some very strong evidence that connected health is breaking out of this holding pattern. For example, in our May survey of 5,000 heads of US broadband households, we saw a pretty high intention to purchase connected health devices and also connected medical devices in particular. As of May 2020, around 1 in 4 heads of US broadband households rated their likelihood of purchasing at least one of our tested products in the next 12 months a 6 to 7 on a 7-point scale. While earlier this year, many companies on the device side of things were negatively impacted by supply chain disruptions and store closures, demand from consumers was extremely high. In the second quarter, companies with an e-commerce presence reported really dramatic spikes in their online sales figures. And while demand has trailed off compared to where it was this spring, it's still pretty high on a year-over-year basis. In terms of consumer demand, our top 3 tested devices are smart thermometers, Wi-Fi weight scales, and connected blood pressure cuffs. All devices that take vital sign data, oftentimes feeding this data into apps that offer feedback and insights, and sometimes the ability to share readings with care providers. Connected medical products as a whole offer information useful in identifying and tracking valuable metrics for improving health and treating chronic conditions. New products can connect to telehealth services or provide feedback and guidance to users, expanding the capabilities of these traditional tracking products. During the initial phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, as was mentioned earlier, 41% of heads of US broadband households reported using a telehealth service in the past 12 months, a dramatic increase from the 15% reported in the second quarter of 2019, or the 8% reported in Q2 2018. Parents and also that 41% of US broadband households that use telehealth are particularly interested in purchasing connected medical devices. Looking a bit more in depth at the telehealth connection, we found that over a third of US broadband households overall consider telehealth services that would allow them to share data from medical devices to be very appealing. Many consumers experienced telehealth for the first time this year, and this wider usage, as well as the education campaigns launched by employers, insurers, and care providers, has resulted in greater familiarity with telehealth and in consumers finding telehealth solutions overall more appealing than in prior years. Consumers that currently own tested connected health devices are particularly likely to find solutions that would allow them to share data from devices to be appealing. This creates opportunities for players in the health space, opportunity to integrate with health devices, opportunity to integrate with platforms that standardize health data, and opportunity to integrate directly to consumer platforms such as Apple Health or Google Fit. Consumers are also using apps and programs that support their health and fitness needs. As of May 2020, over a third of heads of US broadband households reported using at least one type of tested app or program listed here. This is very strongly age correlated. Almost 2/3 of those age 18 to 24 report using such apps, and this drops down to around 20% of those age 65 or over. However, that 20%, around 1 in 5, is actually a very good number. Historically, the 65 plus population has been somewhat reluctant to adopt technology. However, in recent years, we've seen growing adoption of technologies such as smartphones, smart speakers, and now in 2020, telehealth and digital therapeutics. It's a good sign. In addition to using tracking apps, consumers are also participating in digital fitness classes such as classes from online sites like YouTube, video classes that consumers purchased, via a DVD or online video store, classes available from gyms that are now streaming, classes through connected exercise equipment such as Peloton, and also video and audio classes from subscription services such as listed on the slide. As of May 2020, almost a third of US broadband households reported participating in some type of digital fitness class. Most cited that they did so as a direct result of COVID 19. Again, this was extremely generational. Younger consumers were much, much more likely to try out digital fitness than were older consumers. In this case, over half of consumers under the age of 34 reported participating in such a class, while only around 9% of those age 65 plus reported doing so. Over half of our survey respondents participating in these digital fitness solutions say that they are very likely to continue participating after the COVID 19 crisis is over. This suggests that, in the long run, a growing at home fitness movement may become prominent. In contrast to what many have speculated, many consumers are pretty comfortable sharing their health data, or at least certain aspects of it, for a good cause. Roughly 70% of heads of US broadband households report that they are willing to share their smartphone data in order to track the spread of COVID 19 and perform contact tracing. Roughly half are willing to share without any particular qualifiers. And another 20% would be gained by offering the right types of privacy protections. Willingness to share data is actually higher among minority groups than it is among non-Hispanic whites. Looking at our consumer survey data, we see that willingness to share smartphone data is highly correlated with knowing someone who has been infected with COVID 19. And minority groups as a whole are more likely to report knowing someone who has had COVID. Much like telehealth as a whole, the segment of consumers who are interested in connected health devices and health and fitness apps and solutions have changed as a result of COVID 19. These types of solutions are beginning to appeal to a wider group of consumers, and the category as a whole has really begun to break out of the mold to a certain extent. The groups that formed the core segment of users last year remain the core. However, we're seeing much more interest among consumers outside of this core. This includes many consumers who have been traditionally slower to adopt technology, older consumers, those who are maybe less well educated, those who are lower income, and also Android owners. This is largely due to two factors: forced use of telehealth services, and also rising levels of concern about one's health due to COVID 19. I talked a bit about forced telehealth adoption back on Tuesday. As per Parks Associates consumer survey data, back in May, around 41% of heads of US broadband households reported using a telehealth service in the past 12 months, up from around 15% in the year prior. While telehealth adoption has been on an upswing in the past few years, almost doubling between 2018 and 2019, this high degree of growth between 2019 and 2020 was really due to many consumers just not being able to access care otherwise, or preferring to access it remotely due to safety concerns. In terms of consumer attitudes around COVID, Parks data has found that back in May, just over half of consumers were very concerned, rating their concern a 6 to 7 on a 7-point scale, about themselves or about a family member getting COVID 19. Those consumers were around twice as likely as other consumers to report that they intended to purchase a connected medical product, or that they found the ability to share device data with telehealth companies appealing. This was around the same level of impact as telehealth service use overall. As of July, the percentage of consumers who are very concerned about a family member or themselves getting COVID has risen to 55%, or an increase of around 5 percentage points. Around 2/3 of US broadband households also report that they don't believe others are taking COVID 19 as seriously as they should be. This is another marker of concern. Instead of concern about one's own situation, though, or about one's family, they are instead concerned about society as a whole. Expect continued interest in connected medical devices, telehealth solutions, and in app-based solutions among consumers. Something else of note is that quite a few people expect to be making lasting changes to their lives as a result of COVID 19. Over half back in May, and in July, almost 2/3 expected to make at least one tested lifestyle change, such as cooking at home, taking better care of their health, or exercising from home. Of course, people always say that they're going to make changes, but sticking to them tends to be a bit harder. Nonetheless, with this high degree of concern and also this large percentage saying that they see the need for a shift, we do expect to see some of this actually stick. The need for continued social distancing into next year and likely beyond will also play a role in reinforcing these lifestyle changes and in potentially making them permanent. Um, Thank you for joining me for this presentation, and I do believe I have some time to take questions from the audience. So make sure to get your questions in. So I see one question has popped up asking if there are platforms that make the delivery of remote care more seamless. Yes, we have seen a number of platforms arise that do make remote care delivery fairly seamless. These are platforms that really integrate something of a full stack solution, I would say. A lot of these are aimed more towards care providers and health hospitals and health systems. They include check-ins and scheduling, and also oftentimes actual telehealth visits with providers. And the patient will actually be able to see notes and records of their visit. They can access their electronic health records. They can even see their prescriptions on the app as well. So a lot of things managed via single platforms. I want to say that on the vendor side of things, we've also seen some interesting movements. Again, really integrating and tying together a lot of very interesting things. For companies in the direct-to-consumer space, we've seen just this big interest in tying together data from the video visit platforms and also data from devices, pulling in different lab testing partners as well, and also the ability to do prescriptions through different pharmacy partners. So lots of interesting movement on that side of things. But yes, any other questions from the audience? You've got me for around a few more minutes at least, so might as well get those questions in. Okay, it sounds like you all may be a little bit shy right now. We do have a 15-minute Q&A at the more towards the end of the day. So you can ask me your questions then or in one of our chat rooms for the networking discussion. But thank you for sticking with us on our third and final day of the Connected Health Summit, and hope you enjoy our upcoming Visionary Insights. We're going to switch to transition right now. See you back in just a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining me for our Visionary Insight by Angie Kalozek Ibrahimi, Executive Director of Mind Body Sleep Body Medicine at Blue Shield of California. She will be presenting some of what BHC has been seeing in terms of how its member population has really adapted to COVID-19, as well as BSC's strategy for really addressing the needs of their members during this time. Angie?
Thanks so much, Kristen, and thanks so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here at Connected Health Summit. And so today, yeah, as Kristen said, I'm going to be talking about a subject that is near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's COVID-19 and how it has affected healthcare. A lot of things have changed. Some things have stayed the same, but overall, it has really allowed us to move forward with some of the necessary healthcare evolutions within healthcare. So I'm very excited to talk about these topics. So let's just level set a little bit about our situation right now in healthcare. When we created this deck a couple weeks ago, we had 5.5 million COVID cases, 170,000 deaths. I think now we're up to a little over 6 million, 185,000 deaths, or pretty close to that. So we know that COVID-19 is something that is obviously very, very serious. We also know that it's here to stay for the foreseeable future. We know that they're working on a vaccine. They're in phase 3, but it's going to take a while for that vaccine to get spread widely. And until then, we're going to have to live with a different reality. You know, a lot of virtual experiences, sheltering in place, and I know that all of us can relate to that very closely. In parallel to what's going on with COVID-19, we also, and this has happened even pre-pandemic, we have a problem in healthcare, and that is that we have a population that is you know, like 80% of the population is has preventable conditions, and we're spending $526 billion a year on treating these preventable lifestyle diseases. And I think the key word there is preventable, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. These conditions are things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and the things that lead to heart disease. And again, as I mentioned, all of these things are things that can be addressed and prevented. And then one very interesting thing that we're learning is that while you may think that a lot of these diseases and disease burden falls on some of the older population, it's been kind of shifting a little bit, and millennials are experiencing double-digit increase in 8 of the top 10 health conditions. So it's not just, you know, old people, quote unquote, that are dealing with these conditions. It's also younger people. And then furthermore, many of these conditions are tied in with behavioral health and mental health, and those conditions and needs are rising very significantly. So that was a lot of gloom and doom, but let's focus on the positive, because there are a lot of positives that are emerging from the pandemic. You know, there are some overdue changes that needed to be made within healthcare, and the pandemic just pushed us along to making some of those changes. So let's talk about telehealth. In the pre-pandemic environment, telehealth was something that was, you know, used sometimes, but not all the time. And now we're finding that a lot of the population is using telehealth. I'm going to be talking today about our digital therapeutics platform called Wellvolution that we introduced to our population in June of 2019. In that platform, pre-pandemic, we saw about 80% of people using digital therapeutics versus in person. So we had about 20% that were still using in person. And now 100% are using digital therapeutics over in person. And you might suspect, and is true, that that's largely because they are unavailable at this point in time. But even sort of regular virtual PCP and healthcare visits through telehealth has skyrocketed. So around 10% of population pre-pandemic, now almost 50% of people are utilizing telehealth in some form or fashion. And what's really interesting about that is that more than 3/4 of them are saying, you know, I think after the pandemic's over, I'll continue to use it because it's convenient and I'm continuing to get the quality care that I got in the past. Another issue with telehealth in the past was that a lot of the providers weren't comfortable with it. So they weren't even offering it. And of course, they now are also forced to make those changes, but now they're also comfortable with it. So it's like we now have a whole new modality of delivering healthcare that is very, very consumer friendly. Blue Shield of California has really been good at propping up this boost in telehealth. One is with this Wellvolution platform that I'm going to be talking about. And the other is because what we did in the beginning of the pandemic is we said, okay, all of our members, all of your copays for telehealth are waived. And even if you didn't have telehealth services in your product, you now get it today, right? So kind of making some of those systemic changes to help support telehealth was really important to our members. So let me talk a little bit more about this Wellvolution that I keep mentioning, and what is this thing that we're offering to our members? So simply put, Wellvolution is a platform that is focused on preventing and reversing disease through science. And that science is squarely rooted in our belief and our knowledge that lifestyle medicine is often the most clinically effective, definitely the most cost-effective, definitely the least invasive, and least risky intervention that's out there to treat chronic conditions. And when I say least risky, I mean there are no negative side effects to lifestyle medicine. In fact, only positive side effects exist with lifestyle medicine. We do offer solutions to people across the health spectrum. So we have programs for people that are generally healthy to help support their lifestyle. We have programs for people who are at risk for developing disease. And we also have programs for people who already have some kind of chronic condition. As I mentioned, we did launch Wellvolution in June of 2019. At the 1 year mark, we had a little over 23,000 people enrolled. Now it's up to about 30,000, and we had 10 million member interactions in 2019, which we think was terrific. And you might think, wow, that's a lot of interactions for 23,000 people. And the truth is, these programs that we're offering are very, very high touch programs. So once a member is enrolled and engaged, they might be interacting with their provider several times a day. And that's how we're able to get these 10 million member interactions, which creates that adherence and also helps us deliver clinical outcomes from the programs. So speaking of clinical outcomes, we have seen that the average weight loss for people in these programs is 5%. For those who are in type 2 diabetes reversal programs, 3/4 of those members are normalizing their A1C, which is really significant. We're also seeing that people who are on medications, and most people that have chronic conditions are taking 7 to 10 medications per day. Post-program, they're down to, in many cases, none. And in some cases, they're taking maybe like a metformin just to sort of support their trajectory, but it's minimal. And that's not only a great cost savings, but it's also wonderful for the member who may or may not have been experiencing side effects from those medications. And we are the largest digital therapeutics network in the US. We have about 55 or 60 digital therapeutic programs that our members can choose from. And I'm going to explain a little bit more too about how people engage in the platform. And I want to set this up a little bit by kind of organizing ways that we think that the design and delivery of healthcare are changing and sort of illustrated through the Wellvolution platform. So that first way is that people want meaningful and personalized health programs. And we took this really seriously as we launched Wellvolution, to the extent that we did a consumer co-design of the whole program. So we recruited some of our members, some non-members, just sort of general people in California. And we said, what is it that you would want in a program that was here to help you achieve optimal well-being, and mostly through lifestyle? And so we got some very, very distinct themes in that consumer co-design session. One of those themes was, guys, one size fits all doesn't work. I'm a unique person. I have unique needs. And so I need a program that is personalized for me. I don't want a program that you're rolling out to your entire membership and thinking that it's going to work for me. So creating programs that are personalized. The second thing that came out was curation. And so while I am unique, I may need a little help from you, the experts, to tell me which programs, given my unique needs, would work for me. So we incorporated that into our platform. And then finally, while I would like you to curate for me, I want to be in control of my own personal health journey. So at the end of the day, I'm going to make the final decisions. And in the Wellvolution platform, the way that we do this is we, once a person enrolls in the platform, we ask a series of just really simple questions. Some of them are kind of health history questions. What's your height, your weight? Do you have a chronic condition? But then we get more into the meaning. Why if weight loss is your goal, why do you want to lose weight? Are you, do you want to play with your grandkids, or do you have an event coming up that you want to get healthy for? So we're starting to kind of get into the motivations. And then in addition to that, we ask, how do you want to engage? Do you want a telephonic program, a digital program, an in-person program? So we really are kind of creating that unique, personalized healthcare delivery system. And then once someone answers all the questions, they get 3 recommendations. Based on the way you answered these questions, here are 3 programs that we have in our network that we think might work really well for you. However, if these 3 don't look good to you, here's a list of all the programs you can choose from. So again, we have the personalization, the curation, and the ultimate control given to the member. I think the next thing, the next way that the delivery system has changed and the consumers are expecting something more is that we need to move our thinking away from transactional healthcare into delivering experiences. And I think we've done this with our Wellvolution platform. We did a study at the beginning of 2020 asking our members what was the most important thing that they wanted to be communicated about. And the number 1 thing was urgent care. So how do I get to an urgent care center? But the number 2 thing was wellness, well-being, lifestyle, basically ways that they can help themselves be healthy. And what was interesting is that only 15% of those people said they were aware of our programs. And so since then, we've done a really big overhaul in the way that we communicate to our members. We've made these programs more front and center in our web treatment, and as well as our monthly newsletter and that type of thing. So we're getting a lot more interest in the program because there's a lot more awareness. We've also found that with these digital therapeutics, we're seeing that people are reducing their costs. So in terms of creating experience, that's the experience that people live every day, right? Is, I'm paying $100 for this medication and $50 for this one. We can reduce that by 30%, if not more, and that's just an average. One other thing we're learning is that about 50% of our members, actually a little bit more than 50%, choose weight loss as their goal, which is not surprising. And even if they have a chronic condition, weight loss may be their goal. And what we're seeing is that 31% of those people are achieving clinical outcomes in weight loss. And that's when you think about how sort of some of these programs work. Some people enroll and drop off. Some people enroll and engage lightly. So for 30% to actually achieve the clinical outcomes is really, really strong. And the overall satisfaction rating is about 94%. I think one of the most powerful things is that we are getting hundreds of member testimonials that are saying, thank you, Blue Shield of California, for changing my life. Literally, not only did I become non-diabetic, I normalized my A1C, but now I don't have pain in my joints. I don't have sleep apnea anymore. I don't have asthma anymore. I have a better sex life. I have more energy. So it's that experience that we're creating, that it's not just a transaction. We are going to help you reduce type 2 diabetes. What we're doing is we're helping you be an optimally healthy person, no matter what condition that you have. And this is really part and parcel to the third thing, which is breaking the siloed approach and doing so in favor of whole person healthcare. And I think we've all been very guilty in the healthcare industry of that sort of siloed oh, you have a physical problem, oh, you have an emotional problem, and or you have a social problem with access to healthcare. All of that is one person, right? So whether you're dealing with a physical condition, there's a very good chance that you're also dealing with emotional stresses, maybe social stresses as well. So for our programs, most of these programs are centered around a physical condition, but even members who are engaging in programs to address their physical health, they have those emotional and mental health needs. And all of our providers, and this really happened somewhere within COVID, they're beginning to incorporate behavioral health management in their physical health programs, knowing that we are treating a whole person. And again, and I said this earlier, but this lifestyle approach, because we're treating the whole person and not just kind of siloing out one element of a person's needs, is the most clinically effective, least invasive, least costly, and produces only positive side effects. So I think I would be remiss if I didn't also address the fact that in this pandemic, there's also a humanitarian crisis that has been amplified. And I think that this is not something that began because of the pandemic. It's something that we're seeing more clearly because of it. But there is definitely an inequity in ability for people to access healthcare. And that's a really, really important thing to figure out and to address for health plans and health providers everywhere. So we know that these social determinants of health exist, and we started to dig in. We also did this with our consumers, and we asked them, in this social space, what are the most important things to you? One of those that comes up a lot is transportation, and we do offer transportation services for all of our members that need that to get to doctor's appointments and so on. That has become less front and center in COVID because more people are engaging virtually. But one of the things that we uncovered is that people literally don't have the bandwidth to participate in digital programs because they don't have the data plans that support that. So in our social program that we're launching at the end of this year, we will begin to offer cell phone data assistance to members who don't have adequate data to engage in these digital programs that we're offering. Furthermore, we will be offering food services. So for people who live in a food desert or don't have the ability to get healthy fruits and vegetables, they may be engaging in a weight loss program. They're going to need those healthy fruits and vegetables to support their weight loss effort. So we're providing, as part of that program, not a meal delivery, but food delivery service to support that. I also want to call out that this Wellvolution platform is zero cost to the member. So there is no copay, no co-insurance. It is 100% covered by Blue Shield of California. And that's how strongly we believe that these programs are effective. And then finally, we have decided, when COVID began, we said, okay, all copays for telehealth are waived. We have extended our commitment to cover those copays and not to charge them to our members. And that will go on as long as we need to in this crisis. So with that, let me just wrap up with a few of the key takeaways from today. So we know that digital formats are driving healthcare right now. 80% in our platform pre-pandemic, now 100%. But I think even more poignant than that is that telehealth in general went from 10% to almost 50% during the pandemic. I think this whole experimentation with different business models and really treating the whole person, we're getting to a place where we can do that with our providers and our members as payers and work very collaboratively together to create the best possible solution. I think that the future of healthcare is going to be personalized, it's going to be experiential and holistic. And I guess the other thing is just that this Wellvolution platform that we launched in June of 2019 We were very fortunate to have it when COVID hit because we had something to offer our members that was terrific out of a pandemic, and in a pandemic, even more important. And I think that just kind of crystallizing it into one very salient point is that we're successful because we're not just checking a box, we're changing people's lives. So really going back to that, we see you as a whole person, as a whole human being. And with that Wellvolution program, we can address your needs. So with that, I'd love to answer any questions, and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Angie. I think that was a wonderful presentation, and very good to learn more about Wellvolution and really what Blue Shield of California has been doing during this crisis. I think we have about 5 minutes or so for questions. I certainly have a few I would like to ask, a few extra points to go over. So I'm very interested in how Wellvolution recruits participants. Do you guys do any kind of targeted marketing in order to recruit your member population? For example, targeting maybe some of the most at-risk members of the population?
Yes, we do. So Wellvolution is available to all members. Actually, I'll say with the exception right now of Medi-Cal or Medicaid. We are launching to the Medi-Cal population at the beginning of 2021, so very soon here. So we'll be all members. And so for that, as I mentioned earlier, we have a whole spectrum of programs that no matter where you are in that spectrum, there are programs that could help you, whether it's, hey, I'm training for a marathon, I'm really healthy, but I need an app to track my runs and get healthy. We've got that. You may be someone who is pre-diabetic. I have a family history of diabetes, type 2 diabetes. I'm not diabetic yet, but there are some signs that I'm going in that direction. Let's nip it in the bud. And then we have programs at the very highest acuity, like I'm over 30 BMI, or I have type 2 diabetes, or I have hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and so on. So to answer your question, we do a number of things with marketing. So we have a monthly newsletter that we send it is segmented, but the segments are pretty broad. In those segments, we try to provide very salient articles about health and also direct links to Wellvolution. So that's kind of the monthly, just informational communication. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we do is we do have a health population tool where we can look at our claims and see who specifically is a type 2 diabetic or falls into that chronic condition bucket. And to those people, we do specific and much more targeted communications. We are highly digital. We do most of our marketing in digital format, but for some of the populations like Medicare, we know that, and Medi-Cal too, really, we know that those folks are less likely to be online and doing in-person direct mail pieces for that type of marketing. We also do a lot of social targeting. So we do some social media, and it's member and non-member alike, but we try to steer based on our targeting people into the right programs in those social communications.
Okay. Have you thought about maybe working with some of the physicians and others in your network to actually have them prescribe Wellvolution to their patients?
Great question. So a couple of things. We started with the consumer. We felt like we had a little bit more direct access and maybe even a little more direct influence on the consumer. So that's where we started. But we are, a year in, we said, okay, we've figured this out and we'll continue to fine tune it. But we know that people trust their PCPs and their providers, and how do we get in front of our provider communities to educate them about Wellvolution and to get them, as you say, to prescribe it. So we are we're doing some pilots with our ACO groups where we're doing some trainings of those providers. We're creating some communications for them to give to their patients with distinct URLs so we can track to see if they're working. So we're just beginning that work, but I think that there's a lot of promise in it. The other kind of more provider angle that we're going is in the mental and behavioral health space. We are exploring the use of prescription digital therapeutics. So this is this idea that instead of a pharmaceutical medication, that a provider could prescribe cognitive behavioral therapy or other interventions that could be in the form of digital therapeutics. And so those, we're starting narrow with that, and that would be mostly in like substance abuse, depression, anxiety. So in those kind of specific areas, and then we'll kind of see how that works. A very, very new field. Not a lot of people are doing it. In fact, I don't know if anyone's doing it yet. So we're kind of starting to peel the onion back on that one, but hope to have that in place by 1/1/21.
Some very exciting developments, it sounds like. I believe we might have time for one more question. So I'm going to go ahead and ask. On Tuesday, I briefly discussed some of the major challenges that we certainly expect to see over the coming months and years as COVID kind of continues on and more people need to turn to telehealth in order to get care. You spoke earlier to that unconnected population and the need to engage with them. Parks Associates estimates that something along the order of 14 million US households don't have an internet connection, including a fixed connection to the home or even a smartphone. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about how BSC is engaging with this population? How do you identify members who may not have a smartphone or might need assistance to actually get telehealth? And do you have any partners providing connectivity?
Yeah, we do. And so the way that we are approaching that, so I think that the majority of those folks fall in our Medi-Cal lines of business. In some cases, Medicare, or what we call Cal MediConnect, which is kind of like a Medicare, Medi-Cal overlap. So yes, so what I spoke about earlier is that within WellVolition, if you have a need for data subsidy, we can provide that to you through the social program. The step before that, I think, is where you're going with this, in that, like, okay, well, how do people even know about WellVolition if you're driving most of your communications digitally? And even if they got a communication via direct mail, how would they get access to the program and so on? So one of the ways that we are addressing this, there's two really. One is in our Medi-Cal population, we have a number of community resource centers where the members can go in person. And if they have a cell phone but don't have connectivity, the community resource center can help them get connected and get hooked into the programs that we're offering. If they don't have a smartphone or any kind of laptop or computer or anything, they can help them enroll in an in-person program, because they may not ever be able to, engage digitally. And I think that's sort of looking beyond COVID, because we will get back to in-person programs. They always will have to be an option for a portion of the population. So that is one other way. The other way is that we have a number of health educators that work in our Medi-Cal population, and we are offering kind of like a call-in number for members to call in and say, hey, I want to take advantage of these services, but I don't have a phone. So the health educators can help get them signed up and hooked into those programs as well. So they can either go in person or they can call on the phone.
Okay. Very cool, very cool. I believe that's all we have time for. So thank you so much for joining me today in this discussion of this very important topic. I think it's been a really great time, and I think we're gonna have to take a small break before our next panel.
Thanks so much.
So yes, thank you again, Angie, for your insight into healthcare's evolution in a time of pandemic and humanitarian crisis. Some of you may have experienced a few technical difficulties during the stream, where you may have missed the first few minutes of Angie's presentation. We will put the full pre-recorded session on this page for playback on demand after the session ends today. So you will get access to Angie's full talk. And we'll be right back after this short break for our next panel discussion on next-gen connected health analytics. Welcome back, everyone, to our next panel discussion on next-gen connected health analytics. So I spent about 20 minutes earlier discussing some of what Parks Associates has been seeing in terms of health data demand and trends. This panel is going to discuss in a bit more depth some of the trends going on right now, top areas of growth, ways that health analytics and AI can impact the health system, challenges and solutions, and also the topic of data privacy and security. We'll also have a few audience polling questions for you guys to see what you, the audience, really thinks about these topics. So when they pop up, please navigate to the polling tab and swap card on the right of your screen to place your answer to the polling questions. And we will also be addressing audience answers in a 15 minutes time slot at the end of this panel discussion. So make sure to get your questions in early again. So we have with us today a really great lineup of panelists to discuss how COVID-19 has impacted the area of health analytics. This includes Fran A., Head of Population Health Worldwide at HP Inc., Brenda Cass, Data Science Strategist with Validic, John Snowalter, Chief Product Officer at Javion, and Kristen Valdez, CEO and founder of Be Well Connected Health. They're each going to take a few minutes to introduce themselves and also tell us a little bit more about their role and their companies. Fran, can you start things off?
Sure. Happy to. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Fran.
Excellent. So hi, everybody. This is Fran Ayala Somayajla. I'm the Head of Population Health Worldwide at HP. Really honored to be on this panel today and excited to share with you a little bit about who we are and what we do. I believe there's a next slide. Is that correct? Excellent. So, you know, what's really fascinating, and sometimes people forget, is that HP has over 50 years in healthcare. We actually started off with doing things such as cardiac sonograms, and have over the years focused in areas such as medical instrumentation devices, and even in those current years have focused on advanced technologies such as the use of 3D print. We also leverage our technology in the area of microfluidics with the largest manufacturer of microfluidic technology. Being able to employ these types of technologies has been really a pleasure to be able to do in terms of our ability to address persistent needs that we're seeing within industry. We're also doing a lot when it comes to use of more machine to human technology, which is what I look forward to talking to you today about, and really bringing a perspective on the advanced intelligence, the advanced interaction between humans and technology, how that results not only in the collection of new insights, but how that can be converted into new applications and deployments. Looking forward to the panel, and I'll hand it back to you, Kristen.
Oh, thank you, Fran, for that that introduction. And now, Brenda, you're up next. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and about Validic?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Brenda Cass. I am data science strategist at Validic. I have a master's in data science, and I'm aligned to the product side of Validic, so engineering background and product in practice. Validic as a company is dedicated to making personal healthcare data accessible and actionable. So our core platform takes connections to literally as many source partners as we possibly can, manufacturing devices and providing that personal healthcare data. It aggregates them and it puts them all into a single pipeline with a standardized data model that people can connect to and read from. And then in addition to that, on top of that core platform, we also have a remote monitoring application that is called Impact, and we use that. It integrates with EHRs, and we use that to facilitate clinical workflows using PGHD as a more or less, after it's been integrated, turnkey solution. And we're actually working on a self-standing version of that application that truly is just a matter of fire it up and log in, which is pretty exciting.
Very cool. Thank you, Brenda. And now, John, how about you?
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Kristen. I'm John Showalter. I'm the Chief Product Officer at, excuse me, at Javion. I'm an internal medicine physician and clinical informaticist, and I think there's a slide. We really took the ability to understand vulnerability during COVID-19 and dug into relevant clinical events, understanding not only what was the threat of COVID-19, which people were susceptible to COVID-19, but also the vulnerability who was going to have poor outcomes, and focused on tackling what we learned from H1N1, which was that healthcare disparities and social economic determinants really drove increased hospitalization, increased mortality, and we're able to work to create a publicly available vulnerability map that got down to the block group level. As you can see from that slide, the purple areas, the really vulnerable area, and using nothing but publicly available data, we were able to identify by that area, which in this particular case is a senior living center. So using social economics, determinants of health with no clinical data, you really can still understand what the clinical outcomes are for individuals when you use the right technique, and that becomes a very big deal in something like a pandemic.
Thank you, John. And then Kristen, can you tell us a bit about yourself and about BeWell?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kristen. BeWell is a connected health platform that is designed to help industry stakeholders, whether they're providers or insurance companies or employers, transform their digital health experience to move one that is more designed towards consumerism. We operate a platform that has 5 core products on it, designed to transform the way that consumers interact with the healthcare delivery system, and allowing all of our clients and customers to configure their own unique experience for consumers out to the populations that they serve. We start with our data belt, which is our interoperability platform. BeWell is one of the very first and largest trusted third-party applications in the country that operates under those new rules called information blocking and interoperability. We have amassed the largest set of live connected health data that exists in the US market for direct-to-consumer. We use that data to create population health analytics for our clients to help them understand the true opportunities within the populations they serve by combining different healthcare data sources as alongside consumer preferences and likelihoods and their wants and needs. And we help them to create unique programs designed to target individuals down to an N of 1, because we believe that healthcare is personal and that each individual should have their own health journey. We enable them with an engagement platform that enables them to serve up content and messaging and surveys and quizzes in real time and deliver them to the populations that they serve. And we enable them with a marketplace, much like you just saw with Wellvolution and their digital therapeutics. We interact with all of the point solutions, whether they are digital therapeutics, social determinant resources and solutions, telehealth, but also things that consumers may need in order to even get to appointments when in person, like transportation. All of these marketplace partners are open to individuals, and we deliver that through a curated and configurable custom front end for individuals where they can manage all of their healthcare in one place. Because let's face it, healthcare needs a new front end, and consumers need one single launching off point to handle all the fragmentation of the solutions that are being brought to them by their employers, their insurers, their providers, and the 500,000 digital health applications that exist on the US cloud alone today.
Very cool. Thank you, Kristen. And also thank everyone for joining us today for this this panel discussion. Since there's 4 of you and we're all remote, I'm going to try to do something a little bit different than the way we normally handle our panels. So we're going to try to go in alphabetical order by last name. So starting with Fran, then Brenda, then John, and then Kristen, and then something of a reversed order for the following question. Does that work for everyone?
Sounds great.
Good.
Okay, sounds good. So yes, we've spent the past few days talking about really the tremendous growth we've seen in the virtual care solution space, as well as how the regulatory and reimbursement landscapes have really radically changed. Given all these shifts and what's going on, what would you say really are right now the most promising use cases of health analytics from your perspectives?
So yeah, so that's a great question, and I think that when we start to consider use of health analytic data, the first thing that comes to mind really goes back to sort of the components that we were referring to in our introductions, and that is being able to use the data to better understand where populations are and where those gaps are. We've noted that with even the deployment of not only RPM but telehealth in particular, because we've done such deployments at large scale, that it became very apparent that there are gaping gaps, not only in terms of the areas being served, but also in the types of services that are required for those populations. To give you an example, much of what we are finding is that it's not just limited to the care delivery, but actually some of the social services that help support individuals that we are needing to better interconnect. And that is being revealed by this information that we're beginning to collect. The other is around the behaviors too, being able to recognize and gain some awareness in terms of what we thought we understood in terms of the daily life of an individual and how that is actually how some of that rings to be true, but that we've had determined better insights as to sort of what is actually going on in the home of an individual and dynamics that may be impacting their ability to be able to participate successfully within the system.
Yes, I think very good points. Yes, Brenda, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, absolutely. So to benefit people consistently, your health analytics and AI, I think, need to be wrapped in a holistic solution that people are already using and trusting. So your AI or analytic solutions don't really stand on their own as a product. They work in scientific research where you run the model and you test your hypothesis, and then you can write a paper, which often, will then go on to do things like inform standards of care and other exciting things that might then benefit people later. But the opportunity in the rapid growth of virtual care is that with getting all of these new fresh people onto a virtual platforms, that we suddenly have this vessel for delivering our models into their hands in a way that benefits them directly. And we have more touch points with them more consistently, even when they're at home. So I'll share an anecdote. So this is just an individual, but it's kind of a story that shows the power of this. In Validics' own COVID remote monitoring platform, we had a patient that was being monitored in her home, and the devices that she was using to send in data to the platform were indicating to her physician that she was in trouble. And so she received a phone call from her physician, and he suggested that she come in. And she said she felt fine. But then, because she continued to monitor herself using these devices, and that data continued to flow through to her care provider, and her care provider was able to see in this platform all these other trends of folks who have had similar trajectories. He insisted, actually, and sent an ambulance her way and brought her into the hospital. She ended up having more acute symptoms with COVID, and they were able to save her life. And I mean, that really is the power of being able to connect to people even when they're not in a clinical setting, because otherwise, unless she was being monitored in a hospital, this would have been completely missed. And so I think that continues to be relevant, especially in the chronic disease care space, even after COVID.
So yes, definitely a lot of potential there for capturing certain trends, certain conditions, certain emergency situations that would have really otherwise been missed. Yeah, and then John, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Sure, and as was mentioned, I think one of the big things that data analytics and AI brings is the ability to get to the individual. whether that's to get to the individual's trajectory, get to the individual's social economic situation, to get to the specific questions and symptoms that need to be reviewed with that individual. Healthcare occurs at an individual level, healthcare spend occurs at an individual level, and the ability to use data to get those granular insights really is the next evolution of analytics, and is here today and is proving outcomes already.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely important. Okay, and then Kristen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with John completely. First of all, we have seen massive transformation in the regulatory space. 10 years of work really came to fruition, and of course, just a couple of months. So we talk a lot about the transformation of telemedicine, where providers, now have the ability to practice at the top of their license across state lines, but also information blocking and interoperability rules that have taken what has been very difficult, a difficult market to break into for innovators and entrepreneurs and people that ultimately don't have a breadth of healthcare experience from a data normalization standpoint, and helps with new standards that can help people to receive standardized data to improve consumer experience and ultimately give consumers choice in the applications that they want to use that they believe can provide a value into their lives. So we're very excited about that. But a lot of the promising use cases that we're seeing is exactly what John was saying. It's the ability to connect to data on behalf of an individual using their consent and pull in that 360-degree view that's been missing in healthcare for so long, with each stakeholder having a limited view of an individual human being's life and all of the things in health that surround it. Great organizations like Validic, who we are also partnered with, help by streamlining all of the analytics for connected wearables and devices that people may have in their homes in the 99% of the time they're not in the doctor's office. But it is important to merge that information with the data coming from the electronic medical record systems, the payer systems, the lab data, the pharmacy data, and merge that with social determinant information and preferences and likelihoods. So the health analytics promise from this new regulatory landscape is that we finally have data free and flowing to the point where we'll be able to get down to the personalization and give individuals an experience that is unique to themselves and relevant. Because we know from research that what consumers ultimately want boils down to two things. They want you to be there for them when they need you, and they want you to tell them proactively when there's something that they need to do. And digital and health analytics enables a whole new world where we're now able to do that. And I think that AI, machine learning, and data science, alongside even traditional analytics, have a very big value to bring to users based on this new regulatory space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly a ton of potential has opened up in the market this past year with the changes in regulation and with just this massive boost we've been seeing in terms of awareness and adoption of different solutions. So moving to our next kind of topic discussion, thinking a little bit more broadly, how can health analytics and AI applications really create operational efficiencies through data management, diagnostics, virtual care solutions, and administrative improvements? So we could go maybe reverse order this time. So Kristen, John, Brenda, and then Fran.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that we're seeing around how these efficiencies can work, certainly in data management. For anyone who's worked in the healthcare space, healthcare data is notoriously ugly and unclean and unstandardized. So AI applications and data analytics, just in terms of data validation, have a huge role to play in when merging all of these different data silos in creating what is the more likely correct value for data. And the more the data is cleansed, the more valuable it is and more usable that it is. But by combining information from consumer preferences and what they're volunteering alongside their clinical information has helped to find things that are even misdiagnoses. So just one quick story, we work with a lot of trucking and logistics companies, very hard to reach populations. And what we have found is that when we look at their clinical information, we see things that we see across the US in terms of prevalence, metabolic syndromes, diabetes, cardiovascular risk. But when you ask that same set of users, what is your overall concern with your number one overall concern with your health? It's overwhelmingly sleep and stress. And so by looking at BMIs and clinical information alongside what people report to be their biggest problems, it enables us to find things like undiagnosed sleep apneas. And when they can't or won't ambulate in for care and triage, we can use devices in the home, like the WatchPad device or others, which can replace sleep studies in some capacity in order to triage and determine if somebody does have and or is suffering from apneas. And we can use telehealth to reach them where they are in order to get them treatment when they otherwise wouldn't come in or wouldn't be screened or diagnosed. So we think that there's a huge opportunity using all of the combinations of both AI as well as analytics and these new data streams in order to reach consumers personally.
So yeah, certainly a lot of, I think, opportunity there, and just generally really a lot of interest. So I think next, John, do you have a perspective?
Yeah, so with all the new streams of data and everywhere there's coming from, especially as dirty as healthcare data is, we definitely need techniques and AI that handles that. We're never going to get great, clean data. So one of the efficiencies is using math that allows us to deal with data in the reality that it is, which is not clean. The other is identifying these undiagnosed conditions, the struggles that individuals are having, the symptoms that they're having that they're not coming in for. During COVID-19 and with deferred care, hugely important to be reaching out to those people most likely to be having chest pain that might not be coming into the ER that normally would have, and now are going to suffer a heart attack. And unfortunately, looking at numbers out of New York, maybe more of these heart attacks are occurring at home and people are dying from conditions that would have been an ER visit with an inpatient stay and a cardiac catheterization or a bypass surgery. So, gaining the efficiency of knowing when to outreach, who to outreach to, and make those effective is a great promise of AI. The last piece is really operational efficiency, getting good, deep conversations with these individuals, knowing that, just like was mentioned by Be Well, that we are able to say, hey, it's likely that you have sleep apnea. Let's have this discussion. Let's do this. Let's do this study. Let's get you this device. We're having, experiences where telephonic management that would take 3 phone calls is now taking 2 phone calls. So gaining 33% efficiency with the same outcomes because of targeted, directed, individualized insights and care is a huge gain that analytics can give healthcare and allow us to get to more people.
Yes, that does sound like a pretty sizable boost. Brenda, what are your thoughts?
I think that just broadly speaking, on analytics and AI, there's opportunities sort of every step of the way through an organization's data science journey, right? There are more sophisticated things that constantly build up on top of each other. And each step that you take, I think, is going to bring more efficiency and even better quality of care to your organization. So on the more deterministic side of things, just having these data available to you in a consistent and standardized sense, as my co-panelists have implied, means that you can do things like digitally and in an automated way triage all members of your care program that are experiencing or that are suffering from the same condition, triage them based off of the sorts of conditions that tend to lead to exacerbations that can even be fatal. And more so, you can do that from anywhere. So there's a lot of strength in that. But then once you have that data all sort of pulled together into a nice little bundle, then you can take those next steps that go beyond just sort of statistical analysis and move into, more predictive capabilities or, just more automated insights. So you get to do things like what we're seeing in the news lately with AI models that are designed to diagnose things like COVID, right? So in August, I think the NIH put out some information about a model that they're working on. It uses CT scans to diagnose infections. And so using that, they're going to be able to do things like help triage their COVID patients based off of the severity of their infections, and also build predictive models against that data that would help them tell how a patient might respond to certain treatments, right? And so what's super exciting about a model like that, for example, and why I used it as an example, is because this isn't like a totally new idea. It's applying an old tool that we've seen be effective in healthcare with diagnosing for lung cancer. So using those same sorts of scans, that same kind of imaging to diagnose lung cancer. And in a lot of cases, they were able to be more accurate than the folks that were even reading the image. So they use human controls and they pit the AI against people. And in some cases, the AI is even able to beat them for accuracy, which is really impressive. And so when you're able to use the same sort of data, right, going forward. So say we end up getting a huge collection of lung CT scans off of the back of a pandemic. It just goes to show you that this data, having it collected and curated like this in the future, ends up being really, really valuable for other diseases that you might not have even run into yet, which is very cool. And there's a bunch of neat AI cross-training things you can do, which helps save you time and efficiency on training your model that I won't get into. But yeah, I mean, this is all a really exciting step for the industry as a whole. And yeah, it really does begin with, hey, just start collecting that data, start cleaning it up.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, certainly a lot of very interesting things going on with using AI for diagnosis, for identifying really top at-risk patients, and for trying to figure out what is really the best course of treatment. So a lot of decision support. Fran, can you maybe also weigh in on this topic?
Yeah, certainly. And I kind of want to begin, if you don't mind, by just picking up from where my co-panelists had left off in terms of the data. So, I mean, you're right. We have, over 21 terabytes of data on average. It's medical imaging data that goes underutilized within facilities that we can start beginning to deploy. But the reality is that while, yes, we see efficiencies and great accuracies with the use of an AI tool independently, we also find that when we combine that with the human capabilities and human competencies, that the percentage of accuracy actually goes up. So I just kind of want to add that on to the end of that, because I think it's really important. A lot of people are fearful of AI because they get the impression that there's no role for the clinician or other specialists. But the reality is that's not the case. But going back, Kristen, to your original question, I kind of want to, if you don't mind, look at it from the standpoint of two scenarios. The first one is in relation to COVID-19. We've been involved in a program, it's the COVID-19checkup.net, and we've had over 1.5 million individuals who've accessed this site. And while, yes, on the front end, it is assessing or determining whether an individual may have contracted COVID-19, it's not just looking for COVID, it's looking for other disease states that could potentially be misinterpreted. For example, someone may be on the verge of heart failure and instead self-diagnosing and misdiagnosing. And then as was spoken to earlier, as a result of that, we're seeing these increases in cardiac crises, if you will, that aren't being properly addressed. And so, these types of tools, a great example of how that sort of tool has been leveraged along with other connected devices has been, and it's allowed for us to very quickly identify and triage patients and be able to then, along with the management of those patients, be able to deploy connected devices to help to continue to monitor them. And in many respects, where we were going before the pandemic and where we have continued to go during and will go after is really trying to reduce the number of patients that are in the facilities, right? How much of the care that they're receiving can be done at home. And so being able to utilize the data in these types of fashions has really been helpful. But I also want to tell the other side of the story. And the other side of the story is the technology is actually being quite underutilized. A great example of this is in maternal mortality prevention. You know, when you think about every day, there are 900 people, 900 women who are dying during child labor. And when you think about right here in the United States, that somewhere in the US, that there are several women who are going to die today during labor, and not because we don't have a way of treating them, but because we're not leveraging the data that's available, it's very disappointing. Over 80% of these individuals, these mothers' lives could be saved. They are preventable, and they become preventable when we leverage the data. So an example of this is the WONDER program, where we've had over 55,000 women participate in other countries, and the programs that assist the clinicians by giving them decision support tools, as well as giving directly to the families devices like Bluetooth-enabled blood pressure monitors that are able to capture data, and in the capturing of those trends during the 190 days, 90 days pre-labor and 90 days post, we've been able to identify high blood pressure. And why that's important is because high blood pressure is one of the key indicators of preeclampsia. But then when you look at, for example, just right here in the United States, the adoption of these tools is really not taking place in areas where it could take place. And so we continue to see delays in treatment, delays in identification, right, and diagnosis, delays in resources, collection of resources, and delays in transportation and triage, because we're not leveraging it to the extent that we could. But all the data, as all of my colleagues in the panel have described, is available. Yes, there's a lot of unstructured data out there, but there's a lot of structured data. And there are lots of low-hanging fruit areas where we could do a better job of applying the technology.
Okay. So yes, I think that's definitely a lot of really great points. So I think my next topic would be looking at a lot of the challenges we've been seeing in the market. A lot of these are challenges that we've been seeing for a number of years. There is a big need for really true integration into clinical IT systems, a need for interoperability, solutions that use data to proactively identify these health issues, like a lot of what you were talking about, Fran, in terms of maternal mortality, and really what can be done to prevent that. There's also a need for solutions that really better support clinical workflows and reduce administrative burdens. So I'd like to again ask you guys, panelists, what you really believe are the current greatest challenges there are in this market right now, and also how these challenges are being addressed. We also have a poll that we are trying to ask our audience, looking at what these challenges are as well, and that's in the polling tab to the right of your screen. So as we discuss this topic, feel free to go and weigh in as well. So let's again do this in the same kind of reverse order as we did before. So starting with Fran, then Brenda, then John, and then Kristen.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the first thing that comes to mind for me when you start to ask the question was the people. I mean, it seems like you think I would jump right to the technology, right? But it really isn't. I mean, when I think about like where we were pre-pandemic, and then, you know, come March, all of a sudden things change. I'm like, wow, you know, the technology's been around for a really long time. The efficacy has existed for a really long time. What is the thing that's really creating for the gap? It's the people, right? We are part of the whole people process, and technology is a really big aspect of it. I mean, if we think about some of the areas where we continue to have challenges in relation to interoperability, it's because people want to have proprietary closed systems that somehow, you know, they believe that the data that they have is the data that they own, that no one else should have access to. I'm really pleased to see that, you know, there are efforts like you know, Blue Button and other initiatives through CMS and the FCC, the FDA, you know, administrations are really focused on these regulatory challenges. We, you know, IEEE and other guidelines that are coming together through various organizations like HL7 are really making a huge difference. We've progressed a long way, but we do have a lot, you know, a lot longer, or a lot more that we can do. And I think that if we are willing to cooperate with each other more, we'd be able to accomplish a lot more. Brenda, do you agree with that? How do you sit from an analyst from diving into the data and what your team has been working with.
Yeah, sure. As far as challenges are concerned, you nailed it on the head as far as mostly laying it at the feet of the people themselves, right? Because it really does take having an open heart and mind to these kinds of solutions when you've had a standard process for a long time. This is how you've effectively treated people. And then the idea that you would spend money to change that up when it's been so effective for you is a struggle for folks. So yeah, the technology has been around. Validics' own remote monitoring program, Impact, has been around for a couple of years now, and I helped to build it, and it works, and it works really well. And it took something really paradigm shattering, like a global pandemic, to shake up the status quo to the point where folks were really starting to clamor for that kind of solution. You had a few people who had that vision to look ahead and jump onto platforms like that ahead of it, seeing that is the future of efficiency in your organization and the opportunity to treat people where they're at and provide a better standard of care. And so, from my perspective, as far as like the challenges that I end up seeing, in the data itself, in the technology itself, end up sort of paling in comparison. Getting the right set of devices, for example, to folks is less a matter of picking the right set of devices, but having the right sort of logistics in order to get them into people's hands, right? Or being able to work with the devices that people already have is a challenge. And these are all challenges that Validic works actively to address, just to sort of meet people where they're at. But that also includes meeting not just the patient themselves where they're at, but also meeting the clinicians, the people who are going to be using the application where they're at. So, we build our solutions to integrate directly in with the within people's clinical workflow, right? So you're within the EHR that you're normally within, and then there it is. There's Impact. So you don't have to go to a separate place. And that saves people time when it integrates in with those things, and they get to maintain context. And then always you hear things like, hey, I click on a lot of things. So you don't want to forget your human computer interaction folks, your UI UX design folks, have them along the ride when you're working on your solutions, so that you're basically designing the technology that's going to help them get to what they need the fastest. So they're all surmountable problems, and they are all consistent. And fortunately, a lot of the complaints that you see are the same complaints that you see across the entire software industry. And so there's a lot of learnings to be seen from just other companies that might be even solving different problems. Some of them are specific to medicine, but by and large, a lot of them are just, hey, there are best practices for these things. Feel free to borrow them.
Yes, I think there's certainly a lot of solutions in the technology field at large that would be great to apply to the medical IT kind of area. We do have a lot of our responses back from the audience. It looks like about half of our polling responses are saying that the biggest challenge of applying data to improve care practices is actually data in different silos. So we know that historically with the EMR, HMR rollout that took place a number of years ago, there was this really this big patchwork of different systems put into place. A lot of times the systems wouldn't really talk to each other. The data is all formatted fairly uniquely. I've heard it said that you can have an integration to Epic, but that's just one integration. It's not being able to work with other aspects of Epic. So that has historically been also just a really big challenge. And that is also really tied back again to that aspect of people and what the people decided that they were going to do originally. So.
Yeah, Kristen, that's a great point. And I think, what Brenda has also said with Fran is that there's a couple of things to consider here, right? There's two pathways to the question that you've asked. One is interoperability and data in silos. And I think the new regulatory frameworks allow for us to really open that up. But keep in mind that it's a first step, right? So as data is now becoming more available to trusted third-party applications on behalf of consumers, we can pull information and we can normalize that information. And while consumers' number one request is to be able to push that information to the point of care, we still have a ways to go there. But one of the things that we're seeing in terms of helping physicians with clinical workflows and reducing administrative support is a lot of what's already been said, which is kind of lay it at their feet. So one, telling consumers what it is that they need to do proactively. I think most people don't understand, that's not true. They haven't thought about the fact that the majority of how we transact healthcare still largely happens by telephone. So when people are sick or acutely sick, they're seeking care. But when we think about prevention and we think about folks that need to maybe close a gap in care that they're not aware that they have, we have a lot of nurses on phones and PAs picking up the phone, trying to reach people and trying to get them to come in for care. And I think where a lot of these analytics and technology can support is how do we take the burden off of the physician on the proactive side of things, educate the consumer, because education is largely what's missing in the system, be able to use their data to say, did you know, you are living with diabetes, you haven't had your labs drawn in the last 6 months. We'd like to make sure that your A1Cs are in control. Here's what an A1C is. Here's the part of the body that it measures. Here's why we look at it and why it's important. Here's all your prior ranges. Dr. Smith would like to see you in the office on Friday. Can I make you that appointment? And really get to that easy button of the next best step, because where technology has advanced to that most people probably aren't aware of, not only do we now pull data with consent from payers and providers and wearables and labs and pharmacies to create that view, but we can also then educate the consumer, and we can integrate with organizations like Epic and Cerner and Allscripts and Dr. Chrono and actually push scheduling and say, okay, not just telling people what they need to do, because then we're asking consumers to pick up the phone and do something manually. And we that doesn't work because we don't do a lot of great education around health. And so we have the ability now to take that next step for them in a digital format, which saves a ton of administrative dollars. It helps fill the books of physicians with appropriate scheduling. And it also enables us to triage individuals to the right physician at the right time under the right modality. And I think we can do that with consumer preference at this point. And I think, to me, that's the biggest opportunity in the near term while we're working on the continued technology to start pushing to data to the point of care, which is individualized per EMR, per your point.
Yeah, building off that, I think one of the things that is a misperception is that we actually are on the industry side pretty good at moving data around and putting those multiple silos together. So at Javion, we have over 30 million individuals, almost 10% of the US population, where we have their EHR data, their billing data, and their consumer data all on one single platform. So if we can do it for 10% of the US population, we can do it for a whole lot more. We know how to do it, and it can be done at scale, and it can be pushed back to the EHR, to a mobile device, to an app in a way that engages with the consumers in real time to gain efficiency. We know that when we do this, we pull the data together, we put AI on it, and we understand what to do for the individual, that we save hundreds of dollars for people in chronic care management and transitions of care management and oncology care management. If you're already in a care management situation and you add good data management and AI on top of it for insights, we've run clinical trials where we've seen hundreds of dollars of savings for each enrollee. It's to the point where we're in the middle of a 24,000 person randomized clinical trial. I think some of the great barriers are around adoption and a perception that the technology is not nearly as mature as it is. The technology actually is very mature, and we're pushing at that level where we're going to have grade A evidence of effectiveness with 24,000 people type trials. That's not cutting edge, bleeding edge technology. That's proven effective solutions for the problems we're facing today. So I think the adoption piece is real, and there's a misperception about whether or not this can be done. Historically, I was a chief health information officer at a large academic medical center. There's a challenge and a belief, especially within the health centers, about moving data around. On the industry side, I think we put a lot of time and energy into understanding how to do that, and there's lots of places doing it really well. And when one company has done it for 10% of the U.S. population, and there's lots of companies doing it, lots of individuals have their data actually getting consolidated and moved around. But there is a perception that it doesn't happen, and it's I think the perception is a lot more challenging than the reality.
Yes, I
Hey,
think
Kristen, do you mind if I jump in for a second on that? Just in what John had said? Because I think it's made a really great point, right? In the data, research that we've done and group organizations that we've interacted with, one of the things we've seen, John, is really a lack of education, right, with amongst clinicians themselves. I mean, when we think about the curriculums for medical schools and other healthcare schools of healthcare professions, one of the things that we've sort of commented on is the need to just like you've got anatomy 101, so too do you need to have a data science 101, right? So there's this more familiarity with the technology, and that there be more emphasis put on continuing education and professional development courses that are giving clinicians access and information that they need to make these changes to their practice, more rapidly, as well as, more comprehensively. I mean, have you seen the same thing, particularly in the roles that you've had within administrations? I mean, would you attest to that there just seems to be a lack of training even on the clinician side?
Oh, I'll completely attest to that. So I was the guinea pig for the American Board of Internal Medicine clinical informatics. So I think I was actually the first board approved fellowship. We had to go through this whole process to say, informatics is a real thing. I should get credit for it. There should be training around it. There's a board certification program, but the vast majority of people in that program were grandfathered in. They haven't gone through a true fellowship training program. There is a huge lack of knowledge outside of the small informatics groups, the nursing informatics, pharmacist informatics, physician informaticists, understanding of really where the industry is, where technology is outside of healthcare, and how much of a little hop it would be to truly be there. One of those huge barriers was the regulations, or regulations that didn't demand and support interoperability. With those coming, where we really are just, it's not a chasm anymore, but there is not education on how to tackle these problems, or how close we are. And if there is education, it's kind of like, here's a SQL database, and it's informatics training from the 80s or 90s. I see Brenda smiling. So there's a huge education and knowledge gap in healthcare that we've got to close, or it's going to take us 15 years to really get these technologies adopted.
Yeah, so I think the education piece is really interesting, just because in my own role, I have spent a lot of time educating organizations on what analytics even does, what does AI even do, what is machine learning, and you find that a lot of the resources that are available to folks have been pulled together by technologists for technologists, and it doesn't translate. So it puts the burden on you when you're working in technology in the healthcare space. I found that I had the most success when I was able to connect that to the actual things that the people would inevitably be doing, right? For example, chronic care management is a thing that a lot of these folks will understand, because that's their day in and out. They're managing standards of care for treating people with chronic diseases. And if I just come and tell them about, hey, here's a k-means clustering algorithm, they're going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? And eyes will glaze over. But all of a sudden, when you start talking about their own process, and it really does become a matter of understanding their jobs a little bit and putting on your physician hat, even though I personally, I don't have a medical degree at all, right? So it's just a matter of doing a lot of research, listening to folks about what they're doing. And then all of a sudden that talk about this is a k-means clustering algorithm becomes, here's groups of folks within your cohort for, say, congestive heart failure that are all showing similar characteristics, right? And when you base that against their outcomes, right, as the base truth, then you can start to treat those people in different ways and see that as a group, they start to respond in common ways, right? So we really have to bring that conversation to them. I don't think any amount of, here's your SQL database tutorial is ever going to help connect those dots, because it takes real craft expertise, right? You're giving them a hammer and expecting them to be a carpenter when they don't really have any basis for knowing why those things go together.
No, I think that's incredibly true. You mentioned earlier trajectories, and we talk about trajectories all the time. So, you can talk to clinicians about, we've identified that this patient's on a trajectory towards something bad, and that these interventions will turn that trajectory, and then the bad thing won't happen. And they think that's really cool, and they'll really engage on that. If you start talking about, the mathematical technique that you use to calculate that trajectory, they will tune out immediately. And I've always been the nerdy doc and the engineer that wanted to know about the math. And, early in my career, I found out that my colleagues did not want to talk about the math. They wanted to talk about why the math mattered, and focusing on how the math affects their day, affects their patients, affects their efficiencies, is how you get buy-in.
So it certainly sounds like in a lot of ways the healthcare industry is still haunted by things that happened 10, 20 years ago. And there's certainly a lot that can be done on really better understanding the opportunities that are currently available, how technology at present can really help them to improve what they're doing in a really great manner. As much as I'd hate to cut the discussion short, we do need to get into our audience Q&A. We have a lot of really great questions from the audience. I want to make sure that we have a chance to tackle some of them. So yes, our first question that I see that has come in is asking about next generation remote monitoring and also seniors. So in next gen remote monitoring, are seniors interested in having access to their monitoring data? Or do you see the caregiver as the only one with access to this type of data, such as activity levels, sleep, and other data points? And this can really go to anyone.
Well, this is Fran. We've done a lot of research in this space, right? I put on several panels and focus groups throughout the year, and work directly, even volunteer with quite a few organizations that are focused specifically in this space. And what we find is that it depends on the individual, right? If you think about it from a personality perspective, there's some people who thrive on information, right? They're kind of your analytics in terms of a personality style. And so they may want access to that data. I think the biggest thing that makes a difference in how much information someone wants is how well or unwell they are, right? I mean, if you are a post-operative, or you have complex polychronic conditions, and you're not thriving, then you're less likely to be receptive of information being thrown at you. But certainly we know every day nearly 11,000 people are turning the age of 65. People are living longer, but unfortunately are living with a lot of diseases. And as a result of that, we certainly want to give them as much information as possible. In many respects, what they want to know is this technology that I have, does it work? Explain to me why I should believe that it's secure, that it's, that my privacy is being maintained, and, making sure that how I use it is the correct way to use it. And if you do take the time to give the data back to the individual, then making sure that you provide them with enough information so that they're able to interpret it. Because a lot of the data on these patient portals that we're putting out for folks, great, we're putting the data out, but we're also making a lot of people very confused. And that's not just the individual, it's also the personal caregivers as well. So there's a lot of education, a lot of training, but where you are on your health journey is a real indicator as to how likely you are to want to be, bombarded with a lot of data itself.
Mm-hmm. So yes, thank you, Fran. So I guess another question to you all, do you see much use of remote monitoring for mental health conditions in particular, such as dementia, depression, anxiety, or other conditions?
So on our side, from analytics side, we see a marked underutilization. We clearly see the need for it, and when we're analyzing what would change a person's trajectory, frequently mental health assistance with substance abuse, anxiety, depression are in there and are things that we're recommending. Many of those people are highly digitally fluent. Even seniors are highly digitally fluent and would benefit from those types of either telehealth, remote monitoring, self-guided applications. But we've seen an underutilization, but there clearly is evidence and data suggesting that they would improve health outcomes, they would improve management of chronic diseases, and that they would reduce utilization. And we have seen that when people do get engaged with them, they do have better outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's ironic, right, John? I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of ironic that even though they may be underutilized, they're actually the highest users of telehealth and other forms of technology, even though they may not be using it to the percentage of which we'd like to see them using it.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. Everything we've seen, it's highly effective. It comes out when we're running, simulation analysis on what would make a difference in this person. Those things frequently come out when we see people using them. They have better outcomes, but we just see a lot more people that would benefit from them.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a lot of potential there. And I believe, Brenda, you had a point to make.
Yeah, I did. So just circling back to the last question, and I can also touch on this one based off of what I'm seeing from a just bulk data point of view. So real quick, referring to people's likelihood to share and their intent when sharing, and I think I find this to be fairly universal. Just presenting people with their raw data isn't really what engages them. They're looking for an opportunity to use their data to sort of drive a conversation. And that can be a digital conversation. They want to see that their data is being responded to and listened to, kind of in the same way that when you go into a clinical visit and you're speaking with your physician about how you're feeling, they want that to be heard and responded to as well. And so when that's a sort of interactive process, you enter your data and you see that it's being responded to and interpreted for you, then that's when folks really end up feeling a lot of the value. And it goes beyond just they want to share their data, and ends up, we end up finding at Validic that once you cross that bridge and change it just from just showing raw values, which some people like, but once it becomes that conversation, folks treat their devices like gold, and they end up becoming a really important part of the relationship that they have with their healthcare, and it helps to keep them very engaged. And then just real quick on that second question for mental health. It's a really important space. There's a lot of demand for it, I think, both from people who are suffering and also from people who want to offer help in that space. The problem that I end up seeing most as a data scientist is folks haven't really settled yet on how do you quantitatively measure people's progress in the treatment of those conditions. So, there's things like you can measure how long folks have spent being mindful, right? It's a measure of time, but that's not the whole story. And so there's definitely a big opportunity for the industry to come together and settle on how do you measure those things? Because I think mental health is probably one of the biggest underserved opportunities for bringing remote care to people.
Yeah, certainly. Mental health is one of those areas where a lot of patients in general haven't been served. I believe there's massive numbers of people in the U.S. and other countries who may have untreated mental health disorders. Maybe they are going through a period of depression, anxiety, and different other factors that could very well be served by using virtual solutions. So I have one last question for you all before we go to our networking discussion. So we've been seeing on the patient side of things a great deal of interest in these types of solutions that gather data to improve health outcomes. We've also seen a lot of interest in the physician side of things as well. How do you balance this interest in data and the sharing of data with privacy and security? So I think that's something that's top of mind right now with what we've seen with HIPAA temporarily not being enforced and just this massive explosion and adoption, including by a number of maybe stakeholders who aren't as well versed in these issues.
So Validic handles the data of, I think the last time I checked for the past year, over 6 million people, okay? And these are all folks that are very interested in sharing their data and using it. And so even though HIPAA is suspended, this is something that we did before that suspension, and we built towards those HIPAA standards. And I think that anyone who's jumping into this now, it is in their best interest because it's a risk to their everything that they're building right now, because HIPAA will be back. And if they don't keep that in mind while they're building their platform, they might find that when that's reinstated, they end up having to shut down whatever they've built for long enough to change it over and meet those standards. And I will say this, that having Validic de-identifies everything that comes across its platform from an infrastructure point of view. So when we're collecting data from people, I personally, so if I go into my database, I can't see who it is, but I do have all of their numbers, right? And it's amazing what you can do without technically, as an organization, knowing who those people are. There's still a ton of insight to be gained there. And so, yeah, people are hungry to share their data, and just follow this existing standards would be my recommendation. Follow HIPAA. You know, there's ISO certifications for making sure everything is secure. Follow those. And then you'll find that after the world returns to normal, that you're going to end up with a safe, reliable platform that people are happy to send their data to.
Yeah, you know, go ahead, Sean. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, security is, privacy and security is huge at Javion. You know, we're HIPAA compliant, HITRUST certified. There's also a lot that you could theoretically do in HITRUST that we're not comfortable with. So when we're looking at consumer data, we're looking at indices. I do think it behooves providers and patients to worry about the ethics and the ethos of their partners. I think everybody on the call today is in agreement with that. I mean, we're looking, when we buy consumer data at indexes, you know, how likely are you to Google a medical term, not what medical terms are you Googling. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't need to know your transactional data to do what we do. Getting into that transactional data is, you know, frequently just way too deep. And if you look to Europe or to California, there's clearly regulations coming in healthcare on not getting to that transactional data. So for anyone on the vendor side, I would look to the future. If you build at the transactional level today, you may again have to stop and rebuild at some point, because I don't think patients want you using it, and I don't think legislature is going to have you using it 10 years from now. So we're trying to build with the future in mind, and also deeply respecting the privacy of our patients to help them, but not intrude on their lives.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, right? And it's the reality is that whatever leniencies are being in place today, you should always be building for the highest standards possible. I mean, even from our perspective, we kind of look at it as sort of 3 layers, because obviously we protect data at the BIOS level with our devices. We're also, on the surface level when it comes to identification, right? Who are the users? Sometimes you have households, we have multiple users wanting to be able to leverage the same device. How you distinguish between them? When we're talking about older adults, a big aspect of this is security, not just of the device and the data, but also of individuals who may be coming in and out of their home, providing service to them and being able to identify them and be able to indicate that they are who indeed they say they are. So using it for all forms of identification. The other layer that we also add to that is being able to detect, odd behavior, anomalies that may exist in the behavior between devices. So when I started off introducing myself, I talked about, machine to device interaction, but equally considering device to device interaction. And when we're moving into an increased number of IOMT, right, Internet of Medical Things, monitoring those devices and looking for, changes or variations in behavior patterns amongst devices is also really, really important.
So yes, a lot of very, very important factors there. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. So a thank you to our panelists for that great discussion and for taking the time to be with us here today. So some of today's speakers will hopefully be able to join us in the networking discussions that are going to kick off in just a few minutes. Our team, I believe, has already put some of the links in the chat box to the right. So be sure to join us for some further discussion with our attendees, speakers, and also Parks Associates analysts. And also a big thank you to our sponsors for making the 7th Annual Connected Health Summit a reality. We very much appreciate your support. Up next, we're going to have our networking discussions. Our team is, again, placing the direct links to join each session on the chat box on Swapcard. Then we're going to have one last session to wrap up our summit. So join us back at 12:30 Central Time for the Future of Connected Health, Lessons Learned and New Innovations, hosted by Parks Associates Brad Russell. And also we're going to have a visionary insight from Dr. Yuri, followed by 2 insightful panel discussions. We really